Hey, good morning everyone, this is Trackman 44. Hey, this is part 3 of the sawmill trailer build for that Frontier bandsaw. My least favorite weld is overhead. You can see what I've got here is I've got a series of jacks and everything putting pressure on and different clamps and everything to get the twists out of it, but also to get that elevation change to where both of these will be running perfectly level. We need to make this thing as plumb, as square, as true as what we can get it, you know, for pulling down the highway, number one, but then number two, in order for the bandsaw bed frame to actually rest on it. What I'm using for a welder is an old commercial 300 amp General Electric AC/DC to 100% duty cycle, and I'm running on this pass 3/32 7018. Every time you break the arc with a 7018, you notice you see me kind of go like that. That's because every time you break the arc with the low hydrogen rod, it actually draws that flux out into a cup. And so it keeps your electrode from making contact when you go back to strike an arc again. So I've always gotten the habit of just flipping that off there with my gloved hand. And I almost always have a glove on my left hand. You can kind of see how it's going to work. You get into where you're going to want to work, pull your pin, pull your truck out from the way, pull the drawbar off, and now you're good to go. As you can see, I got the axle mounted securely now. It's actually permanently installed. It's perfectly square with the trailer. And instead of using the spring mounts and welding them directly to the bottom of the bar joist, I thought that welding across the span of the bottom of that joist could possibly heat and weaken that material. So what I did is I welded plates onto the actual side of this right here, and then attached the spring mounts to these plates. And those are 3/8 inch plates that I put there. And I think if I remember right, they're like 8.5 inches long. So that's got a very good secure mount. The actual truss stops back here several, I don't remember, 30 inches, 32 inches or so. And all we had was these tail pieces sticking out. I didn't want to cut this off and try to extend the bar joist out. So I just went ahead and used scrap material to build this out to the total length of this top piece at 21 foot and 4 inches. Next order of business is to determine the exact length that I need this to make, so that whenever you turn, if you turn 90 degrees with your truck, you don't want to do any damage to your truck bumper by jackknifing into this here, or you don't want to put any strain on this and maybe bow the entire trailer frame because the axle is going to be back about 10.5 feet on this guy here. Like I said, we try to do everything with material that we have on hand. Here's an example of before picture of those Courier rims. So I've got to go ahead and get this all cleaned out of here, get that rust all out of there, get a Rust-Oleum primer, and then a coat of Rust-Oleum on them, and then go ahead and mount the new tires on them. So that's the before picture, and this is the after picture on one of them. I know it's getting long and drawn out and everything, but it is a little bit of a comprehensive project. But at any rate, I'm down to the very final stages. I'm getting ready to build a tongue for it, or make a tongue for it. I determined what length this needs to be. And I've got my piece of 2-inch stock to put in here. And one point that I want to note is because of the location of the axles, I did that intentionally because I didn't want a real long tail end past the pivot point of the axles. So it's going to have a long turning radius, but that's going to result in much more tongue weight. And if you notice, this front end that I put on here is fairly substantial, fairly heavy. Didn't need to be that heavy, you know, but it's what we had. Didn't have to buy anything for that particular part, so it is heavy. So there's going to be excessive tongue weight. That doesn't matter because all we have to do is shift the location of the bandsaw on the trailer whenever we bind it down, or on the bandsaw bed frame whenever we tie it down, in order to leave, to adjust they adjust the tongue weight. So I'm not too concerned about that. What you do have to consider, if you're going for an extremely long period of time, down the interstate, you might get some harmonics going, with your tongue. And if you use single wall thickness schedule 40 or whatever tubing for that, there is a possibility that you could weaken it and it could possibly collapse. So what I'm doing is what I do on almost all my tongues that I make for off-road trailers to stiffen it up, is I went ahead and took and drilled horizontal holes, or holes horizontally. I think I drilled 4 of them all the way across. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of gas pipe right here, scrap gas pipe, and we're going to insert this. We're going to insert it all the way down to this, beyond this very last hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld these together a little bit at a time so as not to increase or to add so much heat to it that it'll cool and then warp or bend. I'm just going to weld them in a little bit at a time, seal those holes all up, and what I'm going to do is essentially give that extra strength of that 1-inch black iron pipe on the inside. We're going to add that extra strength to this box tubing, and so that'll minimize or have a tendency to eliminate any damage from potential harmonics if you're going down the road and you get that bouncing going on. Okay guys, you can see I got that 2x2 inch chunk of iron with the 1-inch pipe on the inside of it clamped into a heavy 3/8 angle iron. It's a 3x3x3/8 angle iron. That's because if you sit in here and just burn this hole completely full and fill it completely up with weld all the way down the line, what's going to happen is you're going to increase the heat of that one side of this material to such an extent that it's going to swell up and expand, and when it cools down it's going to stretch and then bend the other direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tack all 4 of these places, these holes, into position. Then we're going to quickly turn it over and then go ahead and tack the other 4 holes before it has a chance to attract so much heat that it's going to do any warping or bending. Once I get those tacked securely, then I can go back to business of welding. But once again, I'm not going to weld completely because I don't want that intense heat. But what I'll do is I'll weld a portion of each hole until I fill them all the way up. That brings up another point. This whole trailer has been welded with 6010s and as a root pass and 7018s as a final pass in most cases. Other cases it's all 7018. But what I'm going to do on this, instead of running 7018 on this, I'm going to use a comparable wire that's a 70,000 pound tensile, very comparable to 7018 rod. And because if you do what I want to do and just partially fill it, then you've got to deal with the flux and stuff, the slag essentially, after each weld. You got to deal with getting all that out. If not, you just fill up on top of that, melt it out a little bit, fill up with more molten material with the next pass, and then it still solidifies internal of your puddle, and you end up with porosity inside the weld, which is a weak joint. So by using the MIG, I can start and stop as many times as I want, and I'm not going to have to deal with any flux or any slag build up inside those welds. So that's why we're doing what it is that we're doing. You can see it slides right easy through a class 2 receiver hitch right here. Slides right back into my my mount and pins into place right there. Took a couple pieces of 3-inch scrap channel iron and just sandwiched that onto there. Cut a 1/2 inch off of the one on the bottom so that it'll sandwich in, come right up against the 2-inch material. Put the first cap on, welded the 2-inch to the inside of the first cap, and then put the bottom on and welded that all together, and then welded the hitch and everything to the whole assembly. Like I said before, this is never going to carry any load except for the sawmill itself. So you don't have to worry about this having to be that much more substantial than what it is. The only thing I had concern with is the vibration of the harmonics going down the highway for an extended period of time. That's the only reason I had any concern at all. Now I've got a gusset underneath the class 2 receiver down here. So this is actually fairly stable, and instead of pinning it here, I decided to pin it back there on that cross member. I just thought that was the best place to pin it. Well, if you understand bar joist construction, they're just 2 thin pieces of angle iron that are side by side, essentially, top and bottom, and then they're interwoven with these 3/4 inch metal rod that's actually preformed into that truss shape. And so that's where your strength comes in, is the combination of those guys right there and that truss-shaped rod. But when you look at this thing here, if I put this jack up on here and only support it on these outside edges, and you're dropping logs on and whatever, maybe you get a little bit rough and go to dropping, you don't want all that weight resting right here on the outside edges, which if you look at the jack, when the jack is placed under here, it only comes in contact with the last 1/4 inch. So what I needed to do is span the weight across the entire surface of these angle irons, and that's what's going to give the support and keep from doing any damage, bending, or anything of that nature on these thin angles. So here's the mounting platform of the actual jack, and the width of that bar joist is such that it is only going to rest right here about where my thumbs are, about 1/4 to maybe 5/16 of an inch in on these outside of this portion right here. So that means all the weight is going to be on the outside wings of those angle iron. I just went ahead and made me a plate. That plate is going to go completely across this right here and bolt into the 4 outside holes, just exactly like this right here. And then I'm going to sandwich this plate with another piece of metal that's going to rest on top of the bar joist. This should raise up, slide right over the joist, but the weight of the log and the whole sawmill assembly is going to rest on this plate, this 1/4 inch plate here. Slide it on top of there, sandwich that together. If this needs to be adjusted inward just a little bit, I can just loosen these guys up and slide it right up those lower rails of the bar joist. If you watch the whole series of videos, I think you'll find in part 1, I walked by my old bell saw circular sawmill that's built on a set of trusses just very similar to this right here. And what I did, I duplicated what they built for that circular sawmill. Not exact by any stretch of imagination, but it's fairly close. I figured it was good enough for a circle mill. It's good enough for this little light-duty bandsaw mill. I hope you all enjoyed the series. It's been a fun series building the trailer, but it is always a challenge with old and used material. Like I said, this here is real old piece of steel. It's rusted, it's pitted and everything, but it don't matter. It's good enough for this thing here, you know. It's even got a couple holes in one of the fenders, but it doesn't matter. That gives it a little bit of, give it a place for the water to run out whenever you're driving in the rain, you know. I hope you all enjoyed it, sincerely. It's been a fun one. You know what's next. Mounting the sawmill bed frame to it, and then putting the sawmill head on it, and then seeing how it's going to work. One thing about it, it'll be what it'll be, whether it works or not, but I think it will. So you know what? This is the end of the sawmill trailer build. This is Tractor Man 44, and I'm out of here, guys.